17-year-old Manae Noguchi never thought that her best friend would have her buried alive. Her obsession for a fake boyfriend experience had her begging everyone, including her best friend Narumi, for money to support her habit. The more Manae asked, the more resentful Narumi became, until her love for her best friend turned into hatred. But the money wasn't even the main reason why Narumi plotted her best friend's demise. If you like this video, we would appreciate a like or a subscribe. It really helps us out. Manae Noguchi was the perfect daughter that every parent dreamed of. She came from a loving and disciplined family in Funabashi, Japan, and was the oldest of 3 girls. She was kind and gentle, but also adventurous and talented. She enjoyed art, was a part of the tennis club, and excelled at karate, winning several awards in local tournaments. But by 2011, her good girl image shattered after she entered her last year of middle school. She developed a passion for fashion and started to dress provocatively. Her reckless behavior wasn't exactly a secret to her classmates. At 14 years old, she smoked, drank, and was suspended from school for stealing. She even had relationships with older men. Despite her behavior, she was able to pass her high school entrance exam. But Manae hated high school and dropped out after her first year. She ran away from home regularly and even lived with her best friend for a time. And while Manae was slowly spiraling down the wrong path, the real trouble started when at 17, Manae met a 24-year-old host named Luca. For those who don't know, host clubs are nightclubs that employ good-looking men and women to give a customer a fake romantic experience. And it can be expensive. Customers have to pay to get in, and they have to pay an hourly rate to spend quality time with their favorite hosts. These hosts earn a commission when they convince their customers to buy overpriced liquor or other items at the club. From the outside, it may seem like a harmless fantasy, but for some women, it can turn into a dangerous obsession. Some women have fallen so deep into the illusion that they have lost everything: their money, their dignity, and even their sanity. And unfortunately for Manae, she fell right into the trap when she met Luca while he was working as a catch outside of a club. A catch is someone that advertises for businesses like restaurants, host clubs, and cafes, and they usually pass out flyers. Though, host and hostess catches can be aggressive and follow people or even try to pull that person into their clubs, as you can see in this video. Despite being underage, the club let her in, and to her family and friends, she never left. She spent every waking moment at the club, spending money that she didn't have all on Luca. Sometimes she would be at the club for Luca's entire shift and wouldn't go home until noon the next day. Her obsession with Luca was evident all over her social media. She constantly tweeted about him, and in one tweet she wrote, "If it's not Luca, it has to be Luca. I only want Luca. I only love Luca. Only Luca is important. I love me who loves Luca. I love me who thinks of Luca. Luca's smile, his singing voice, his laughing face, his angry face, his face when he wakes up from sleep. I love everything, everything, everything." And as she ran out of money, she started to regularly ask her best friend, 18-year-old Narumi Yuasa, for money and clothes. Narumi was Manae's ride or die after they met as first years in high school. Like Manae, she was a member of the tennis club in middle school and was well liked by her peers and juniors. Narumi's overall reputation was that of being a good girl. And just like Manae, by the time she got into high school, her good girl days were over. She dyed her hair blonde and fell heavily into the Yankee subculture. Yankee is a youth subculture based on rebellion. They reject Japanese society norms and are associated with juvenile delinquency. Yankees usually dye their hair bright colors like orange, blonde, or red, and are pretty close-knit groups. And while some groups are just social clubs, there are others that are involved in gang and criminal activity. We don't know if Narumi was involved in any criminal activity, but we do know that she was very involved in the lifestyle. It wasn't uncommon to see her at all hours of the night, speeding up and down the streets on her boyfriend's motorcycle. Given the girls' personalities and interests, it's not surprising that they became best friends. Manae even lived with Narumi for a time after she got into an argument with her father. And while Narumi stayed in high school and eventually graduated, Manae continued to spend all of her money on Luca. But a jobless teenager can support a whole grown man for only so long. She racked up debt at the club and she needed money fast. And so, Manae began asking her friends for money. Since Narumi was her best friend, she regularly helped Manae out. Manae's constant going out and spending money on Luca was a regular argument between her and her father. In 2014, it all came to a head one night when Manae and her father got into an explosive argument and she ran away from home for the last time at 18. Having nowhere to go, she moved in with Luca and his roommates in Chiba. To Luca, Manae was his cash cow. He was once the #1 host in the entire club, but his sales started to drop. But when he realized that Manae was obsessed with him, he manipulated her to spend every last penny she had to get him back to the top. He lavished her with attention and sweet words, and Manae ate it up. She was even seen giving him money outside of the club on more than one occasion. After Manae ran away from home, Narumi helped Manae get a part-time job at the hostess club where she worked. But there was a problem. Manae didn't have an ID or driver's license, so to prove that she was 18 to potential employers, she borrowed Narumi's yearbook. But the job at the hostess club wasn't enough to fund Luca's lifestyle. She began working at various soaplands. A soapland is a Japanese brothel where men pay topless women to bathe them. However, it's an open secret that more than just bathing happens. Manae hopped from soapland to soapland, and each time she borrowed a yearbook from a different friend to prove that she was 18. For whatever reason, she left the yearbooks at her jobs and never bothered to return them to her friends. As time went by, Manae proved to be a mooch. Even when she was regularly working, she still borrowed money and clothes from Narumi and her other friends. Whenever Narumi asked for her money and yearbook back, Manae would either make an excuse or simply ignore Narumi's texts and calls. The longer Manae ignored her, the angrier Narumi became. Narumi wasn't alone in demanding her stuff back. The number of friends that never received their money and yearbooks grew, and because Manae was Narumi's best friend, the others complained to Narumi, hoping that she could get through to Manae. But after repeated attempts, Manae simply stopped communicating altogether. The straw that broke the camel's back is when Manae bragged on Facebook how she was going to buy a 1,000,000 yen champagne tower for her beloved host Luca. But the truth was, Manae was broke. To give her darling Luca a champagne tower, she had to put down a 500,000 yen deposit, and so she went back to her begging ways to scrape up the money. Narumi's blood boiled when she saw the Facebook post. Manae was broke, but all of a sudden she had money for a champagne tower? By this point, Manae had piled up debts of hundreds of thousands of yen, not to mention the clothes and makeup she had taken from Narumi and never returned. As a result, their friendship turned sour. She hated Manae with a passion, and she vowed to get revenge, and it would be on the night of the champagne tower. So Narumi confided in 20-year-old Yuki Ide. The two were friends with benefits, and she always went to him when she had a problem. She texted Yuki, "I really can't get in touch with her, but if I do, I'll lose it. I'm ready to get caught by the police." After telling Yuki that she wanted Manae dead, he volunteered to help. Yuki didn't know exactly how he wanted to kill Manae and decided to ask his friend, 20-year-old Shoda Nakano. But calling them friends was a stretch. Shoda was more like Yuki's henchman. Yuki once paid Shoda's $800 cell phone bill, and ever since that day, Shoda belonged to Yuki. Yuki took advantage of that, as well as Shoda's mild intellectual disability, and they had a weird master-servant relationship going on. Yuki would often beat Shoda with a wooden stick and force him to do errands. And now, Yuki was roping Shoda into a murder. 2 days before the murder, Yuki and Shoda devised a plan that involved kidnapping. But Shoda suggested that they should bury Manae alive, so they didn't have to carry a corpse. They ran their plan by Narumi, and she was on board with it. On the morning of April 19, 2015, the trio put their plan into action. Yuki and Shoda rented a car, then drove to a home improvement store and purchased zip ties, tape, and socks. They went to a field near Yuki's parents' home, and Shoda dug a hole that was a little over 3 feet deep. At around 6 p.m. that night, they drove about half an hour from Funabashi to Cho Ward and picked up Narumi from work. They parked outside of the club where Manae planned on having the champagne tower and waited. Their plan was simple. Once Manae stepped out of the club, they were going to grab her, toss her into the back seat, then zip tie her hands and feet. They even decided to go by aliases Kai and John since Manae didn't know Yuki or Shoda. But as they sat for hours, Manae never left the club. Around 9 p.m., Narumi got a call from a 16-year-old friend, and he told her that he needed help with a flat tire. So instead of waiting any longer, Yuki agreed to help, and they drove to change his tire. With their plan a bust, they decided to try a different tactic. Narumi enlisted the 16-year-old and said that they would split up to look for Manae. Yuki and Shoda were in the rental, and Narumi and the teenager in his car. But what the group didn't know was that Manae had left the club early with a friend to take a break at a nearby hotel. As the group searched up and down the entertainment district, Manae and her friend were just leaving the hotel to head back to the club at 10. But as they were walking, a car suddenly swerved right in front of Manae and her friend, blocking their way. Narumi jumped out of the car and in a fit of rage, started screaming at Manae about everything she owed. Manae was afraid and tried to get away, but Narumi wouldn't stop. Manae told Narumi that she wasn't trying to ignore her and that her phone died. Narumi demanded that Manae get into the car to talk to a senior colleague, but Manae said that she had to get to work and told her no. Not taking no for an answer, Narumi yanked Manae's arm and dragged her to the car. When Narumi wouldn't let go, Manae gave up. She told her friend that she would catch up later. Manae got inside and the car sped off into the night. Minutes later, Manae's friend received a terrifying call. Narumi was hunting Manae down and Manae was in danger. Unfortunately, the warning came too late. It was the last time anyone saw Manae Noguchi alive. Narumi, Manae, and the 16-year-old soon joined up with Yuki and Shoda. Then, all four piled into the rental. Manae was in the middle back seat, flanked by Shoda and Narumi. As the group drove, Narumi began interrogating Manae about the yearbook. When she couldn't answer the question, Yuki asked, "Which is more important, the champagne tower or your friend's stuff?" After driving for a few miles, they pulled over and robbed Manae. Yuki looked inside of Manae's wallet and said, "That's it." That's when he gave Narumi and Shoda the signal and they began attacking Manae. They restrained her hands and feet with zip ties, stuffed her mouth, then taped it shut and blindfolded her. For Yuki, it was like he was in a movie. Giddy, he asked Shoda, "Tell me what's going to happen now." And Shoda answered, "From now on, you're going to die." It had to be a horrifying realization for 18-year-old Manae. She was going to lose her life all over a yearbook. On the way back to Funabashi, the group pulled over and Manae was dragged into some nearby woods by Shoda and Yuki, where they intimately violated her. She was thrown back into the car, and while laughing, Narumi pressed the lit cigarette into Manae's skin. Everyone except the 16-year-old boy took turns hitting Manae throughout the ride. Once they got back to Funabashi, Yuki drove to his parents' house to borrow a shovel. Even though she was gagged, Manae begged for her life. Narumi coldly responded, "There's nothing to talk about." At around midnight, April 20th, 2015, the group arrived at the field where Shoda had dug the hole. Yuki told Shoda that he, Narumi, and the teenager would be back, and to bury Manae just a little. We don't know what those three were doing, but what Shoda did was nothing short of monstrous. Shoda pushed Manae into the hole, and she ended up in a sitting position. He took the tape off of her mouth, and Manae immediately began pleading for her life. She cried and said that she didn't want to die. The field was located in a semi-secluded area, and while they wouldn't be seen, there were houses close enough that it was possible that people could hear Manae scream. The louder Manae begged, the more anxious Shoda became. Fearing that he would be caught, Shoda made a deadly decision. As Manae pleaded for her life, Shoda shoveled dirt into the hole. Her pleas became more frantic as the dirt rose to her chest. Shoda's fears of being caught outweighed any mercy he might have had. He only stopped shoveling after her entire head was covered in dirt. But Manae's cries could still be heard from her makeshift grave until 12:30 in the morning. By the time the group returned, Manae had suffocated to death. Yuki was surprised that Shoda had actually buried her. He joked, "You already buried her. You're like a demon." Shoda stuck the shovel into the ground and said, "You can't reach her." Yuki was actually disappointed because he wanted to bury Manae. The group then covered the burial site with random tools and went home as though nothing had happened. As they drove, Narumi told the teenager to toss Manae's phone into the river, and they split the money that was in Manae's purse. She only had 14,000 yen, or about $97. Narumi took 10,000 yen, then gave Shoda and Yuki 2,000 yen each, or about $13. When Narumi gave Yuki his cut, Yuki complained, "Only 2,000 yen for this job?" Now, you would think that committing a murder would be a secret that a person would take to the grave, but Narumi bragged about what she did just 4 hours later. At around 5 a.m., she called one of her friends and said, "I buried her alive. I was really scared. I got irritated and lost my temper." And she wasn't done with just one call. Around 10 a.m., a mutual friend of Narumi and Manae called Narumi to let her know that she had a meeting with Manae on the 22nd to get her yearbook back. Narumi bragged, "She's gone. I tied her hands and feet and threw her phone in the river. She was so loud, so I pressed my cigarette into her to get her to shut up. She jumped around like a fish. She then laughed and told her friend not to tell anyone. But Narumi wasn't the only one with loose lips. Shoda sent an email to a friend as soon as he got home about what he did. He wrote, "I'm the strongest right now. Between you and me, I could kill people without mercy." He even told someone at work. Yuki also casually told someone that he ended the life of Manae. Rumors of Manae's death started to spread like wildfire among their friends. That same day, Manae's sister learned in a group chat that her sister might have been murdered and buried. On April 21st, one of Manae's friends contacted the Funabashi Higashi police and told them about the rumor and how he couldn't get in contact with Manae. Narumi, Yuki, and Shoda quickly found out about the investigation and tried to get their story straight. Narumi wanted the men to say that they didn't keep Manae and let her go that night. Yuki immediately signed up for decontamination work at the Fukushima nuclear site and told Shoda that they should go together. 3 days after Manae's murder, her father filed a missing persons report. That same day, the 16-year-old boy and Narumi were arrested, and Shoda and Yuki were arrested the following day. On June 4th, 2015, Yuki Ide, Shoda Nakano, and Narumi Yuasa were indicted on charges of robbery, murder, arrest, and confinement. The 16-year-old was sent to a family court and was charged with delinquent act of arrest and confinement and was sent to juvenile reformatory. The first to go to trial was Shoda Nakano on November 11th, 2016. He acknowledged that he did it and said, "There's no doubt about it." Shoda's defense was that yes, he did it, but due to his intellectual disability, he was manipulated by Yuki to murder Manae. Shoda said that he was afraid that if he said no, Yuki would force him. But the prosecution challenged that by showing an email that Shoda sent to a friend that said, "I can kill without mercy." Shoda also testified that he didn't think that burying someone was such a serious crime. He was found guilty of all charges and was sentenced to life in prison on November 30th. At the sentencing hearing, the presiding judge said, "Words cannot express the fear, suffering, despair, and humiliation of the victim that was buried alive." The court also found that Shoda was a willing and active participant in the murder. The court deemed that his intellectual disability was not grounds for a lighter sentence. Narumi's trial was held on January 13th, 2017. She was tried in family court since at the time, a person was still considered a minor until they turned 20 in Japan. Narumi claimed that she never meant to murder Manae and that it was Shoda and Yuki that planned it. She said that she had no idea what Shoda was doing in the field after they left him with Manae. Hoping to get a shorter sentence, Shoda became a witness for the prosecution, and he told them everything. 2 more witnesses were put on the stand, and they both told the same story of how Narumi bragged about killing Manae and how she wasn't remorseful at all. When Narumi testified on the 6th day of the trial, she claimed that she didn't even know that Manae was really buried until she was arrested. But her testimony went downhill from there. She admitted that she stole the money from Manae's purse, but only 10,000 yen, and really it was compensation because she missed a day of work due to Manae. And technically, it wasn't right to charge her with robbery. She then told the judge that she expected to only get 10 years, and when she got out, she planned on opening up a nail salon. But what really upset Manae's grieving family was when she told the judge, "I don't feel that I did anything wrong. To be honest, I'm too occupied with myself to even think about Manae and her family." She was found guilty of all charges. During the sentencing, Narumi's mother and sister appeared at court and apologized to Manae's family. They vowed publicly that they would take responsibility for rehabilitating Narumi and begged for her to get a suspended sentence. She was later sentenced to life in prison. On December 18th, 2018, she filed for an appeal, but her life sentence was upheld. The last to go on trial was Yuki Ide on February 13th, 2017, and he denied all of the charges. In their opening statement, the prosecution said that Yuki played a leading role, including planning the crime. He was also the one that told Shoda to dig the hole in the first place. The defense argued that Yuki only intended to intimidate Manae that night. They said that because Manae was crying, Shoda buried her. The reason why they had aliases was so that Manae couldn't identify them after they released her. Unlike Narumi and Shoda, Yuki apologized to Manae's family and read a letter to them expressing his remorse. But he still claimed he didn't do anything wrong. On March 10th, 2017, Yuki Ide was sentenced to life in prison. The presiding sentencing judge said, "This was a brutal crime that trampled on human dignity. He gave irrational excuses from beginning to end and didn't show sincere remorse. In March of 2018, he appealed his sentence, but his appeal was dismissed. And he appealed again on December 25th, 2018. His appeal was rejected. If you made it this far, thanks for watching. And if you want to see the seedier side of host clubs, watch this video about a host club owner that was murdered because he made his employees eat live fish and much worse as punishment.